This is the Investor Mindset Podcast, and I'm Steven Pesavento. And for as long as I can remember, I've been obsessed with understanding how we can think better, how we can be better, and how we can do better. And each episode, we explore lessons on motivation and mindset from the most successful real estate investors and entrepreneurs in the nation. All right, guys, welcome back to the Investor Mindset Podcast. I am very excited. I have Carla Blumenthal in the studio today. How are you doing, Carla?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Steven?
I am amazing. And Carla coaches thoughtful, high-achieving men to build strong relationships and a more successful careers through emotional intelligence, which I think is super important. She's coached executives and senior leaders across the U.S. in a ton of different professions, including real estate, tech, marketing, entertainment. She's worked with DJs. She's worked with Emmy-nominated entertainers, PR Week 40 under 40 CMOs, Facebook executive. I mean, the list just keeps going on. She's worked with a ton of high-achieving people, but her specialty in particular is coaching them from the emotional perspective. So you ready to jump into this, Carla?
Let's dive in.
All right. Well, obviously you're helping people figure out one of the most important things is how do you live a better emotional life, which emotions is directly tied to happiness and, the quality of the relationships we have. So tell me, if we start by taking a look back at your life, what events or influences from your childhood, from growing up, from being a kid, shaped who you are today?
Great question. So growing up, I was quite quiet and introverted, and basically was sort of overwhelmed by the world around me. Mm-hmm. And even there's a funny story. I actually have a photo in my apartment here of myself as a preschooler. And in the preschool teacher came up, and every time someone would an adult try to speak with me, I was so overwhelmed and shy that I just sort of opened my mouth and didn't say anything. So I have this photo of me in my apartment to remind me of who I used to be when I was younger. Quiet, introverted. And that actually, I used to see all of those qualities as negatives, right? Uh-huh. And that they were holding me back from, being out in the world. But what I realized over time, more recently in my adulthood, is that those are actually incredible superpowers when I use them for what they really are. And what I mean by that is over time, I realized I'm quite perceptive. Yeah. I'm quite intuitive and aware of the surroundings and what's the nuances of what's going on around me. And so looking at my childhood and seeing that I was, quiet and sometimes overwhelmed by thoughts or emotions, but now that I've built my own strategies and my own way of seeing that these are superpowers when I learn how to utilize them in the right way, it's actually really transpired across my work and what I do day to day and my relationships.
Oh, I could absolutely imagine. I mean, when you can take something that is at your core and you can learn to accept it and appreciate it and recognize that it is something that can really help you move forward, it frees you from feeling of not being enough, which frankly, people don't ever want to admit, but a lot of people feel it and they feel in some part of their life. So I'm curious, how did you go about finding those things out? How did you go about figuring out that those things were actually, a benefit and not a negative?
Totally. Well, it's taken many years and it's come through my own, honestly, my own pain and learning over time. Really, I moved to New York City, which is sort of the opposite of what you think that someone who is maybe more introverted would do. But honestly, I was drawn to so much of the energy of the city. And growing up, if we take a step back, I actually did a lot of theater and acting because I realized being in someone else's shoes actually freed me in many ways. And I learned about thoughts and emotions and all this, sort of characters' inner worlds. And that allowed me to just feel much more confident. So doing that when I was a teenager, and realizing, wow, New York City is like the place to be if you want to do that. I just always knew that I wanted to be there no matter what I was doing. So I ended up moving to New York and basically worked in advertising and marketing over several years. And I was let go from my job in 2014. And as like a type A person, that was really a huge turning point for me of saying, okay, I've done everything by the books, right? Mm-hmm. Like what my parents said I should do, what the university said, what, bosses said, and realizing that you can do everything by the books and still be unhappy, still feel not just that you are yourself, right? And also that you aren't contributing the way you want to be.
And
so that
control, when a type A person, you want to be in control and you find out I am doing all the things so that I can have that. And then I don't. Totally.
So that was the big turning point. And basically starting in 2014, I went on several years of studying, working with different coaches, reading every book I could, and learning about my childhood, learning about what made me tick, and learning more about myself. So it was through some feelings of being disconnected, feelings of unhappiness that actually, and ultimately being let go from my job, that sort of was the turning point to learning more about myself.
Absolutely. Well, I've learned to love this stuff because I believe that, when you can reach inside and understand yourself, you can understand others, and understanding others and connecting with others is kind of the key. What would you say though? Because, a lot of people are not at that point where they're ready to accept it. A lot of people think, well, this sounds frou-frou. I don't want to look inside. Why does this stuff matter?
Yeah, I hear you. And that's what I was like that. I'm like, what is there? What else is there? Everything is right. I'm taking a lot of action. I'm living in New York, being able to, live the life right on paper. But what I realized is, even though I did that, I'll speak for myself, even though I did that, there was still this just disconnection. I just felt like, why am I still not fulfilled? And I searched, traveled, did, everything I could outside. But what I realized is, at the turning point I was at, is, wow, there's so much inside my brain, inside my heart, inside my emotions that I've never even considered. I didn't even know was there. And so I hear you. Sometimes in starting working in the work I do now as a coach, clients are sometimes like, what, questioning, what are we doing here? What is all of this stuff of looking inside? But I can tell you there's so much that is trying to come out and express itself. And so looking inside actually will provide you more clues when you combine it with taking action on the outside.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely will. And it sometimes comes out in ways you don't want it to, which is why it's so important to be able to dig in. So tell us a little bit more about what your primary focus is. What is it that you do, and how do you help people?
Sure. So I work with thoughtful, ambitious men, helping them have successful careers and more fulfilling relationships. And you listed who I work with, but basically everyone sort of shares the same traits, right? They're all at some type of turning point or crossroads, or just ready to see something differently or take different action in their life. Mm-hmm. And they're really curious. Like, what else is there? I had a client say to me one time, once again, I did everything in the book and I'm still not happy. And the equation that I had been using my whole life wasn't producing the same results. So I need a new equation, and I don't know what that is. And that's the exact work that I work on, is helping clients build that new equation for themselves. And I have some clues around what that is, but for each person, it's going to look different. But that's why taking a look at all these different areas of their life, starting with childhood, mindset, emotions, all these areas is a really important process.
And if somebody is going to get started on that process, I mean, where do they start? Because if you're coming into it brand new, fresh, and you're feeling like, I'm working on my investing business, I'm making moves, or I'm trying to get started, but I just can't seem to get over the fact that I don't feel like I've got it, or there's something that keeps holding me back. I've got all the tactics, but I'm just not doing it. Where does somebody get started working on some of this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a great question. So, I actually have a process that I'd love to share. I call it the I gain process or method. And basically it's quite simple. So the I stands for inventory. A lot of people just sort of set goals and just make a run for it. But unless you inventory where you are, really describe and take an honest look at what the problems are. Describe in detail. I like to write this out. Describe in detail the problems, what's coming up for you, and your current situation. You'll have a really good idea of actually communicating any issues going on and what you need to learn. So that's a really important part, is inventorying, because when you do that, you can actually set much more specific goals, which is G, really setting those goals and that they're aligned with, any challenges that are going on or where you want to go. The A in gain is action. So really taking consistent action on those goals. And I think that's where a lot of people set the goals and take action, and maybe it's, one or two bursts, but the consistency over time is really important, in being disciplined in that way. And then we head into the I in gain, which is integrate. So the integration is a big part, right? We can look at how long habits take. There's different scientific research, but it's about I've heard 66 days or so of integrating these habits. So that's new habits, routines, rituals, the consistent action that you've been doing in the A part. And then lastly, you reach a new normal. So whether you reach your goal or not, you've ideally up-leveled in some way. And the N is the new normal. So this I gain process, what's so cool about it is you can consistently go through it. Sometimes it's a short amount of time, sometimes it's over several years, but what's cool is you'll always loop back. So you're always reaching for that new up level, and you can continue to go back to inventory where you are and then continue through the process again. But the inventory and the integration are really, really important.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense, right? So you're really getting an idea of where you're at, and then you figure out where you want to go. You take action, and then you make it the new normal. You make it what you're doing on a daily basis. But when you're just getting started and you don't know what you don't know, how do you figure out, the awareness of where the issue is, right? Or what to do or how to solve it? Because I feel like it can actually get overwhelming from an emotional standpoint. You're talking about digging into emotions and what's probably holding you back. How do you do that?
Yeah. So I like to look at myself and what I did, because I was exactly in that spot 5 years ago of saying, okay, it was quite overwhelming. So I just started with basically anything that I could put my hands on. A book, a podcast, talking with someone in maybe a new community that I wanted to be connected with. I worked with a coach who really changed my life. And so I realized, though, you don't need to rapid change your life overnight. You can take that book, really, really listen, understand it, integrate the practices, to listen to the podcast, integrate that. So it is a step-by-step process. But what I realized is just even starting with those small things makes a big difference. And to be honest, what really jump-started my growth was working with different coaches.
Absolutely. So 2 big takeaways for me there. One, we have to be patient. So us high achievers, people who want everything to be done right now, I have to recognize that, okay, well, if I'm in this situation, I want to make some emotional change, or I want to make some change in my life, it's going to take time. The outcome doesn't happen in a minute or in a second. Maybe my decision to make a change can happen in that moment, but actually seeing the results. And so I have to give myself a little grace if I'm not exactly the way I want to be as I'm going through this process and building some integration and actually getting a coach. And so that's, I think, what the big takeaway is. So I've been working with a coach for a few years, and they've completely changed my life, because what I've noticed about a coach, and I want to hear your opinion on this, is that they can see what you don't see. Yeah. It seems like they're asking the most basic questions. I'm asking myself, why am I paying them a ton of money? But it's because they ask the simple questions that I can't ask myself. And even if I do ask myself, I'm not able to call myself on the BS that I know that I'm saying out loud. And so from your perspective, how did that person help you unlock your potential so that you could start helping other people do the same?
Well, it's very similar to what you said, is that they saw blind spots, right? In many ways, I didn't know what I didn't know. And all I knew is that in 2014, I was sort of spinning my wheels, right? And I wanted that new equation in many ways that my clients describe. And so in working with my first coach, she helped me see things differently. And I think that's a really foundational element here, is seeing things, or that shift in perception can be such a huge part of starting to build some awareness, so you know what action to take, right? So what I mean by a shift in perception is noticing where, what a potentially negative thought is leading you to take, action that you don't want, or a self-limiting belief. Starting to sometimes we don't even recognize that we have them, because we're in our own body, we're in our own mind, right? How do we even know that we have them unless someone else can lovingly point them out? And so starting to recognize that, for me, it was that those slight shifts, which actually turned into big ahas over time, because if looking at the iGain process, I integrated that. And that has really changed the trajectory of my life. So those shifts in perception were actually really big over time.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, if I'm an investor over here, or, a high achieving person, and I'm pushing, I'm out doing really good things in the world, I feel like I'm kicking butt, and I just want to get that little edge of my business. Why would I even consider focusing on my emotions? Why would I maybe not just focus on, what's that next tactic or that skill? Why is this actually more important?
Such a great question, Stephen. So when it needs to be a combination, and when we look at the emotional world, when we start there, what we're actually doing is looking at some of the insidious ways that our emotions might be self-sabotaging us, might be keeping us at a plateau. So what I mean by that is, if there's some ways, whether it's a mindset thing or an emotional thing, a lot of times when we distract ourselves, so we reach for our phone maybe a couple more times a day than we want, when we go for that late night drink, or when we maybe buy something online that we might have some regret about, or even we might say something to our partner that doesn't really feel in alignment with us. All of these seemingly small things, if you're a high achiever, sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big, but these things don't just come out of nowhere, right? They come from a place usually inside of us that we either haven't learned how to handle, or don't have the edge on our anything like frustration or anger or seemingly negative emotions that might be fleeting. But if we don't totally understand the ins and outs of how those might be getting our edge away from us, how it's keeping us at a plateau in work or relationships, then you bet we're going to be stuck. And so these understanding your emotions and how they work and how they may be keeping you where you are is actually such a key that will help ignite that further growth.
Absolutely. So I recognize, let's say I'm in a scenario and I recognize that I'm sabotaging, that I'm saying something that I don't mean. While I'm saying it, I'm like, what am I saying? And you're in that situation. Well, what do? Because it's already happened or it continues to happen, and you recognize that there's an issue. I mean, how do we start clearing that stuff out so that we can move forward and be a better leader or a better husband or a better partner?
Totally. And this is what I call emotional fitness. So, right, like being super aware of your emotions, being really strong in how to work with them so they don't sabotage you, right? So in emotional fitness, the whole idea here is that the first thing is being able to really recognize exactly what you said. In fact, a lot of people don't even recognize when they're in it, when they're in the sabotaging. So it comes down to basically starting to understand that we all have emotions, but starting to be able to recognize and name them. When we can recognize and name our emotions, we're able to, basically they don't have as much unconscious power over us, right? How many times did we, over our lives, did we get angry, but never said, oh, wait, I'm angry. Why am I angry right now, right? They can feel really powerful, right? Frustration, even joy, right? Like even some of the positive ones. So when we literally name our emotions, we're actually creating some power within us versus being a victim to the emotion, right? So when the emotion could be overwhelming, by naming it, it's such a critical step. Once you name it, you can choose how you want to move through it, right? You create your power within yourself to say, all right, you know what? I'm angry right now. I'm really pissed about this or that. Like, what can I do right now to either solve the situation, or can I, have some compassion for myself? Maybe I go take a quick walk. Maybe if I'm on the phone, say, hey, you know what? I think can we have a call in 15 minutes or tomorrow, and I'll be able to really assess the situation a little bit clearer. Right. So in the moment, in real time, being able to come up with different strategies once you name that emotion. And then, really, like I said, treating yourself with compassion, it's a really high level thing to move through all at once.
So you recognize that you have a moment, an area, an opportunity to grow and to improve. You're recognizing, you're identifying it. That's actually giving power, because you're seeing that there's an issue. Now you can work on it. Yep. Just like if you're working on something in your business, you got to know there's a problem before you can solve it. And so when you're in that situation, it sounds like, one of the strategies is, hey, let me take a moment. Let me go do something. But there could be a ton of different ones depending on what it is that you're doing. And then you actually start taking action. But a big takeaway is that you got to give yourself a little grace, that you got to not beat yourself up because it's an emotional situation. You're hurting. The fact that you recognize that, there's all this emotion tied up inside. And the only way you're going to be able to move forward and grow is if you can give yourself a little bit of space to do so.
Totally. And the way I see this is you want to move through it versus cycling in it, right? A lot of us can cycle in the same emotions over time. And then that has a ripple effect to everyone we know and love, right? Versus saying, I'm going to take ownership. I'm going to move through it in as healthy of a way possible. And then you're on the other side, clearer, calmer, and ready to take more consistent action.
So let's say we're in a situation and we feel like we're in that cycle and we can't break the cycle. We just keep being in it. It just keeps coming up over and over and over again. And I know so many high achievers that this is the pattern, whether it's in their home life or it's in their business life, and they just can't seem to stop doing that thing. or they know exactly what triggers it and they know exactly what triggers the other person, and they're just stuck there. Like, how do they break the cycle? Because it seems overwhelming that, well, it's just not possible.
Mm-hmm. Versus believing that it is possible, right?
Sure.
That's the first thing, is saying, okay, I'm in it and I don't like it, and I'm going to really take ownership for what this is, personal responsibility, and also believe that I can change. Those are like the 3 headlines in the beginning of really saying, I'm going to look for the opportunity to shift it.
So you recognize that you're in it, and you recognize that it's possible for you to change, because until you get to that point where you recognize that it's possible to change and that you want to, you're never going to change. You're just going to stay in it because you're going to feel justified in that emotion. Totally.
So yeah, I think those are the big areas. And then once again, at this point, you may not have a blind spot that you're in the problem, but you may have a blind spot that you're, how do I get out of this? And that's where I think, having that person, someone outside of you. For some people, it may be a friend. Some people, it may be a mentor, a therapist, a coach, whomever is in your circle, helping you move through it. And like I said, this is about not just staying in, but really building the confidence that you can move through and things will be different on the other side.
Absolutely. And so you've been doing this for a while. Tell me, what do you think differentiates the people who succeed at making these changes versus the people who don't?
Really good question. So the first thing coming to mind is the curiosity. The curiosity that how can I look at this challenge in front of me or whatever is going on? How can I look at this differently? And really being open to learning. We talk about growth mindset, but it's so key, having a growth mindset that, okay, I'm not sure of the answer, but I know I can grow. That's the first thing. And second, truthfully, really desiring to change.
Yeah.
If someone tells you, oh, you should do this, or there's a lot of shoulds, you might make some small incremental progress, but it's when you make the quantum leaps, that is when you have the fire within you. And sometimes the fire is your own pain and suffering. And sometimes it is just, hey, I know things can be better, let's up level. It doesn't really matter, what ignites it, but to sustain it over time, some pain or suffering, or like, I want to get out of this situation, might be the starter to ignite it. But to continue to up level, that will be your own desire, your own, wanting for more for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is some really powerful stuff. What are some of the keystone habits, the things you do on a daily or weekly basis to help kind of strengthen this muscle so that you really can be your best self throughout all sectors of your life and business?
Totally. So there's a couple things. So one, yearly, I have a big mindset and goal setting session over several days. So I really inventory everything from the year, and I take a look at what went well, what didn't, how I want to change, and then really look at the upcoming year and start to map that out. So that's a pretty in-depth process that I do really in between Christmas and New Year's. And I give myself several days to move through that. But that really closes the loop on the year before and sets the stage for a great new year. So that's the first thing, is yearly doing that. Monthly, I look at, I set goals. I look at really 3 areas. So it's called the DOS. So dangers, opportunities, and strengths. I forget who coined that, but I go through that process of looking at what I need to keep in mind, what the opportunities ahead are for me, and then the strengths. So any type of resources or mentors or coaches or anything within me that is a strength to move me through that. So that's monthly. And then daily, there's so much. I like to work out a lot. I really eat clean. In the morning, I have like as soon as I wake up, I have a full glass of water. And I also in the morning when I meditate, right before that, I write down every day 3 things I'm grateful for and 3 things I'm proud of. And the proud of is really important. The reason why I started doing that is actually my coach really encouraged me to do that, of not just looking at the wins on a weekly or yearly basis, but to look at it almost every day. Because when you look at even the smallest wins, that can help build momentum over time and helps really integrate the things you've done. So that's a really important habit for me.
I love all of those. I mean, it's so important to bring those things that you're grateful for or that make you feel good to the forefront, because it's easy to forget. It's easy to forget how great things are. And that good energy helps probably fuel other parts. When things aren't going as well, it kind of keeps you moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So we've made it to the growth rapid fire round where the questions are quick, but the answers don't need to be. What's a book that's impacted your life the most, or one you're excited about right now?
So one of the foundational books that really helped me early on was Byron Katie's Loving What Is. And I've read so many different business books and personal development books, but that one continues to come to the forefront because it can help you take any thought that may be keeping you in that cycle we were talking about and take you through 4 really simple questions to help you see the thought differently and help you make changes. So I found that to be really groundbreaking, and I honestly had to read it several times to really get it. So
That's great. I've heard amazing things about that book, and I know one of my favorite mentors, Tony Robbins, has built his belief changing exercise off of Byron Katie's 4 questions, and I've used it in my life, and it's fantastic. And I've been meaning to read that book, and now that you mention it, I'm adding it to my list. That's amazing. So from an inspiration standpoint, who are some of your mentors, the people that you learn from, the people that you looked up to that really helped you and influenced your career?
So there's a couple of people that come to mind. First is my first coach, Dr. Tracy Thomas. She helped me learn just more about myself and helped me see all the things that I talked about earlier in our call, that they were superpowers, right? Of how I can see who I naturally am, and that they can be of just incredible service to the world. So working with her was phenomenal. My current coach, Emily Williams, helps me continue to up level and really show what's possible in your life. And I think having that person that shows you what is possible is so inspiring. And the last person, honestly, not a mentor, but my now husband, we've been married 3 weeks, he having a partnership that is so equal and so supportive of each other. He also runs his own business and is a real estate investor. So having a partnership that is just all about growth and all about collaboration, and I think is just leaves you, so much farther on the starting line than everyone else. So
Absolutely. And from a purpose perspective, what drives you to live your best life every day?
Honestly, my own knowing my own experiences of where I have been. We talked about all these habits and routines and things that I've done. That's taken years to integrate. So knowing, and like many people in the audience listening, I know what it's like to feel stuck. I know what it's like to feel like I'm doing all this stuff, but nothing's clicking or things aren't moving as quickly as I'd like. And honestly, living my best life now every day helps me thinking back to who I was. That inspires me to actually continue to move forward. I have so much empathy for that woman I was several years ago, that girl I was many years ago, and to actually continue to push forward and see how much better it can really get.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. That's amazing. Before we part ways for the day, I really want to ask you an important question. I think a question a lot of people are going to ask themselves after listening to this is, what should people look for in a coach? If they're going to go and they're going to be working on things from an emotional standpoint, working on their emotional fitness, how they can be better and show up better in their life, what should they look for?
Yeah, great question. So the first thing that comes to mind is, does that person live in integrity with what they're teaching? Mm-hmm. So important, right? That person that you can, whether you have a discovery call with them or you're listening to them on social media or podcasts, whatever, has that person truly lived what they're teaching? And do they practice it every day? Mm-hmm. And that may be some subtle cues that you pick up, but that's really the most important thing. I often think that, you are your own methodology. What I mean by that is, are you living and breathing the thing that you say that you are doing, or at least practicing it if you're not at the level that you want to be yet? So that's the first thing is, are they truly practicing, and can you pick up the clues that they are in integrity with what they're teaching? The second thing is, of course, going on their website, learning about the work they've done, testimonials, potentially speaking with past clients, really seeing that does this coach solve the problem that I have? And if you don't know the problem yet, start to get really clear on what the challenge or situation is. The more you can define that for yourself, and in a conversation with a coach, the better you'll be able to see, do they have the solution, or is working with them the solution that I desire.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely recommend that if anybody is not working with a professional, somebody who can see some of your weaknesses, see some of the areas that you can improve on, that you really should. It really made a big difference in my life. It's one of the reasons I was able to scale up, and buy 200 houses in the last 2.5 years. And it's because I learned from other people who already went down the path. And then I learned from people who are way smarter than me at some of this stuff on emotional fitness, on personal growth, on personal development. And they saw the things that I was missing because I was having in a conversation with them, and it made a big difference for me. So I definitely recommend it. And for those listeners who are interested, where can people find out more about you or get in touch?
Great. Yeah, so my website is the best way. It's carlablumenthal.com. And I do have a gift for your audience. I have a workbook and an audio that helps people really become more productive and focused by overcoming your inner critic. We've talked a lot about giving yourself compassion, right? So you're not getting caught in that cycle. And really, one of the key areas, there's so many, productivity hacks, but an internal way to look at it is, how do I stop self-sabotaging? How do I stop having those loud inner critic voices? And so this audio and workbook does that. And that's at carlablumenthal.com/investor mindset.
So we'll include the link to that in the show notes for everybody. And I've gone through it. It's really great. I'd recommend checking it out. So thank you so much. And it was so great talking with you. Thank you for teaching us a little bit more about how to be more emotionally fit. And I look forward to the next time we get to hang out.
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Thank you for listening to the Investor Mindset Podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Head over to theinvestormindset.com to join the Insider Club, where we share tools and strategies from the top investors and entrepreneurs on how to take it to the next level.